If you have ever felt like you were worried, if you have ever been worried that you will be found out as a fraud, you've been in a scenario where you feel not good enough, or you don't belong, you're not up to par, or you're doing something that is completely outside of your comfort zone and you're questioning whether or not you really should be doing what you're doing, today's episode is for you, because we're going to dive into imposter syndrome, which is something that plagues so many people. You are not alone, and we're going to unpack it today, or at least try to get started with that.
It's a big subject.
It's a big subject. All right, so let's go.
I'm going to dive in.
Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. You've built success, but now it feels like you're shackled to your business that you've created. Hiring isn't clicking, scaling revenue feels stuck, and instead of freedom, your business is running you. You're not average, and you're done tolerating it. That's why I invite you to take my alignment assessment at consciousedge.com/assessment. You share what's really happening. I personally review your answers and show you what's holding you back, so you can reclaim your time, grow your income, and finally use your success to live fully and unapologetically. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm your host, Alicia St. Germain, founder of the Conscious Edge, where I help women entrepreneurs get out of their own way so they can live joyful, fulfilling lives. I am here with my regular co-host, Jonathan Duggar. Hello.
Or maybe irregular co-host.
You're not irregular.
Okay. I'm feeding into the subject that we're about to cover.
Be kind to my friend. Be kind to my friend. So today, I don't believe that we have really talked directly about imposter syndrome. And I don't know how we made it 75 episodes and it never crossed our mind to talk about this, because every time it comes up online, every time something gets shared in the context of imposter syndrome, every time I'm talking to clients or a group of people, it hits them so hard. Like it's so relevant to people. So I am really excited to talk about this, because I feel like I probably spend 90% of my time with clients in some facet of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's because, there's a lot of reasons that we could direct this conversation, or there's a lot of avenues. But when you said that we haven't addressed this in 75 episodes, it just kind of hit me. We have indirectly in a lot of ways, because the symptoms of imposter syndrome are so profound in both personal and professional settings, and they affect all of us in some form or fashion. Even if you're not aware, and I'll save that until we get into this a little bit more, but even if you're not aware, there's some things that you may be doing or not doing because it's directly related to this, what we're calling imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. So I think that's a good place to start. If I look at just the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of imposter syndrome, it's a psychological condition that's characterized by persistent doubt concerning one's abilities or accomplishments, accompanied by the fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite evidence of one's ongoing success. So my question for you, the psychologist, is this, like, what is this, and where did this whole concept of imposter syndrome actually come from?
So it became kind of a tangible framework of behaviors and symptomology in the 70s, some research that was done in the 70s, and this group of researchers came up with this concept that they called imposter phenomenon, which we've changed into this range of symptoms and behaviors called imposter syndrome. So you can look at it from a psychological perspective as a grouping. A syndrome is a grouping of different behaviors and symptoms that have some somewhat predictable outcomes. So from a clinician standpoint, you don't look at this as something that's treatable until it does cause significant impairment professionally and personally. And maybe we'll get into some of those impairments that actually do show up that are significant enough that I'm so excited I can't get my words out. Significant enough that you would seek professional help.
Okay. I think it merits, it's worth saying that everybody, most people, I would say, that at least the people that I talk to and my friends and my colleagues, we all have moments of feeling like an imposter, questioning whether or not we are expert enough, have enough knowledge, should be doing what we're doing, and worrying that other people will judge us. I think that's a big component, is the worry of being judged for not being qualified, essentially. Yep. And I think that there's a certain healthy aspect to that, like concern to say to oneself, you know, should I really be doing what I'm doing? Am I qualified for this? And if I'm not qualified, what would I need to do to have what I need in place to be qualified?
Right. So, I mean, sure, the conscientious piece.
Right.
And trying to be authentic, trying to be accurate, trying to be concise, all those things are good things. But where imposter syndrome comes in is when it becomes exaggerated to a standpoint of, even though you have evidence, and that was an important piece of the definition, even though you have evidence to the contrary, you're negating that evidence and saying, I'm not good enough to do this. I don't know enough to do this. I'm not smart enough to do this, whatever it is, even though there's direct evidence to the contrary. So that's where it becomes potentially incapacitating.
So I think it makes sense for us to start with kind of some symptoms.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people hear the word imposter syndrome. We may not be aware that this is what it is or this is what's coming up for you. So I look at imposter syndrome kind of with three components, and I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this. But I look at, there's a component of worthiness, which can look like undercharging or undervaluing what you do in your business. So you're not making as much in your business as you could be, or and sometimes to a detriment, right? To it's not sustainable for the business. There's the people pleasing that goes with worthiness. It can be on the flip side where it's like a huge ego, like ego on legs, because I've got to disguise it. Because if anybody posture. Finds out, I got to have bravado, and a big resistance to being wrong. So being able to receive feedback is so hard. So that's one component, is the worthiness piece. The second one being perfectionism. And then the third component being what I would call receptivity, or the ability to receive. So that can look like someone gives you a compliment, says you've done something well. Oh no, you point out what you did wrong. Like you immediately reject that compliment, point out what you did wrong, maybe act like anybody could do what you did. You may not ask for support or accept support when it's received, like when it's offered. And then also, this is something people will say to you, can I pay you for this? Oh my gosh, this was so amazing. You were so helpful. Can I pay you for this? And you're like, no. And that I hear a lot too, where people don't accept payment, or an opportunity comes along and they don't take the opportunity because it's like they're not capable. So kind of three buckets: worthiness, perfectionism, and receptivity. Would you add anything or expand on any of that?
I would add to just an overly critical, self-critical, and sometimes generalized, just overly critical in general.
Yeah.
And a focus on the negative.
Right.
Those tend to be pretty big symptoms that you could say play through almost anyone struggling with these types of challenges. So
like kind of into that perfectionist bubble of like self-critical, but not just critical of self, but oftentimes critical of others too, because you're seeing in everybody else what's wrong too.
And even critical of situations or jobs or potential opportunities where you go ahead and sabotage it because of that fear of being not good enough to do it. So somebody will say, well, here's a great opportunity, or here's this client I'd like to introduce you to. And your first thing out of your mouth without even processing or even thinking it through is, no, that won't be a good fit for me. Or you go immediately to something that negates the possibility because you don't want to actually get into something where you might fail or you might be found out or whatever the thinking line goes.
Do you think like constant, being that you and I have come from from training, we see a lot of people who are serial seminar junkies, as we call them. Like they just take course after course after course and they don't do anything. Do you think that's also falls into that category?
I think it does. And that's actually one of the areas that I thought about. Oh, yeah. Like I mentioned when we first started, I think there is a category of people that really struggle with some of these things and don't even know that they do. And one of those things is this self-defense mechanism of, I'm doing these self-improvement things. I'm bettering myself. Well, they're posturing at that, but they're not actually doing it. And that's what happens with the seminar folks sometimes is they're getting all this education and they're getting all these things because they want to get it right. There's a conscientious element to it. Like you said, there's a healthy piece to it, but they're doing that in order to know enough, I'm using air quotes,
right?
So they don't fail. Well, we know that's a huge fallacy. There's always more to learn. There's always things that can go wrong, even if you know. So it's those places, and that's where the other side of that is learning to get comfortable with failure. We have evidence that we can do it, but we still negate
We discredit
that.
it. We discredit that evidence.
Yes.
I got it.
And you can think about it. You can probably, most of us can find this in ourselves, but we can also definitely see it in other people. If you have that friend or colleague or family member that you have seen, like you've seen them you've seen them perform, you've seen them finish a task, you've seen them come up with a creative idea. And anytime you say something to them about, let's work on this together, or that was a great job, they immediately go to, oh, well, that was just luck. Or I got lucky that time, or that's so unusual. I don't know how that happened. Or they go to the far negative of, oh, well, that still wasn't how I wanted it to land. That wasn't nearly as complete as I wanted it to be. They find a way or reason to sabotage it, either in their language or in their behavior or both. That's imposter syndrome. That's where you directly saw the evidence that they can do what they think they can't, or what they're saying they can't. So we've probably all experienced that.
Knowing it and having evidence that you're capable of it and still not doing it. That sounds like a big assumption.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is.
It's so funny because yesterday I was writing down and I wanted to see, all my clients, like what was their goals? What were their big assumptions? And for those of you who are new here, you may not know what a big assumption is, but it's essentially a belief that you've made up in your mind about the way the world works and you exist in it. It drives your thoughts drive your feelings drive your behavior. And so it's very black and white. It's always this, never this. If I put myself out there, I'll be rejected by everyone or no one will want to work with me. It's oftentimes very extreme. And so, yeah, these sounds to me like imposter syndrome is really driven by a series of big assumptions and things that we learn over time.
That actually is part of the research, ongoing research, and some fairly recent research talking about where it comes from. And it is a lot of early childhood experiences, a lot of looking for evidence to prove that you can't, starting from a place in early childhood. And it's like every time something happens that reinforces that, you're like, see, that's why I can never be whatever. That's why I could never do this kind of job. That's why I could never have this kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So
every time you say that, every time you reinforce your imposter syndrome, every time you tell yourself that you're not good enough, don't know enough, you are just deepening those neural pathways and creating those results over and over again. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we want to change what we say to ourselves. We want to change the dialogue that we are having with ourselves. So how do we do that?
that's actually number 5 on my list of 5 things. And I think that's a good one to go to first, because it really is one of the most important, and it kind of ties into all the other ones. So there are quite a few different approaches that you can take from an actual technique or therapeutic work that you might do with a counselor, or a psychologist, or therapist, or a coach, that's related to how we change the script or rewrite the script. Well, one that I'm personally utilizing a lot with myself and with my clients is, and you've heard me talk about it before, is self-compassion. And the more I dig into that and the more I work with it with myself and others, the more I realize how far-reaching it is. So it's, these things in cognitive behavioral therapy and some of the thought-stopping techniques and other things that are part of very relevant tools and techniques, they really are driven by learning self-compassion and practicing self-compassion. So you can think of it this way. If you've ever been in a situation like we were talking about, a friend or a colleague, and you recognize and even have empathy and compassion for them because they're struggling, and you say in your head, or you say to them, you are capable of this. I've seen it. Here's the evidence. Well, self-compassion, the practice of self-compassion is simply turning that back to yourself. Turn that language, turn that empathy, turn that compassion back to self, and start working on the script, rewriting the script from the standpoint of, I can do this. I have the evidence. And practice catching yourself when you get into that false narrative of, okay, I'm not judging this. I'm just stopping it right here. And I'm going to figure out how to rewrite it. I'm going to figure out how to oppose that language, how to go against it in a way that's fact-driven, that's insight-driven. Does that make sense?
It does. And I wanted to, as you're talking, so one of the things that Jonathan and I love to do is dissect words. We love to dissect words. We were just doing it the other day around pride and being proud and feeling pride. And so one of the words that I've recently dissected is compassion and empathy and kindness. And what I found fascinating, and I don't know that I really realized, was when we have empathy for someone, we can relate deeply to how they feel. Like we really get it. When we have compassion, we have a component of empathy where we feel it, but we feel compelled to help alleviate suffering. So if you're really going to have self-compassion, it's not just acknowledging how you feel and being aware of it, but working to alleviate the suffering that you are causing yourself.
Exactly.
And I don't know that we've ever really, maybe we have, maybe you have, and I just wasn't ready to hear it. But I thought that was fascinating around the compassion piece versus just empathy. So many people are aware of how they feel with not being compelled to do something to alleviate the suffering.
Yep. And that's where the practice of mindful self-compassion comes in. Because if you become mindfully aware with the intention of being able to effectively improve, feel better, do better. I mean, that's why that pairing of mindfulness and self-compassion is so powerful and so far-reaching. And I know I talk about it a lot, but
Yeah,
the more I practice it, the more important the evidence is there of how important it really, really is and how lacking it is in our society.
well, and so one of the things that I would say that I do around this is really looking at you're talking about looking at evidence, but even taking it another step further is instead of looking at the evidence as it relates to you, looking at the evidence as it relates to being in service and support of other people. So like focusing out when, even though what you might have done, you would have liked to have done it better.
Mm-hmm.
You may feel a bit critical of it. What was the outcome that supported and served others? And what was the joy or the alleviation of their suffering or whatever it is that you did? And what was the outcome in the way that other people were served? So what feedback did you get from people? Like actually receive that feedback, because it's not about you. It's about how it supported them. And when you reject their feedback and you discredit like what you did for them, it belittles it.
Yes,
and
exactly.
So I wanted to add that piece of when you're looking at evidence, look at the evidence of how it exists in the context of the greater good.
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes we need to get external validation in order to help support our own internal network, especially when we're struggling with finding it within ourselves, having that external reference, point of reference and validation. I would add to that, as long as you do, I mean, the most important resource has to come from inside. The most sustaining resource has to come from inside. So as long as it's a practice of, okay, now let me apply this, let me continue to do this so that I'm building sort of my evidence bucket, filling my evidence bucket. So when I need to, I can go out and say, well, this situation showed that, how I helped this person and the effect of it is evident. You know, so something to reference sometimes you definitely need.
And I want to put a qualifier on that. One is, my clients know this, we do not assume what anybody is thinking or feeling. We can only ask people what they are thinking or feeling. And we don't get to tell them that what they tell us is wrong. And that was make up a different story. So whatever, we take it at face value and what they share. We don't interpret faces, because I am one of those people, you will misinterpret my face because I am having a completely different thought in my head about something completely unrelated to what is happening. And I will make
4 or 5 of them.
Yes. And I will make a face. And if you try to interpret my face, you will misinterpret something for sure. So we stick to what's fact, and we stick to only asking for feedback directly and not inferring what we think, because what you think someone else is thinking is just another projection of what you're thinking. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. So that's one piece, right? Is we really build the evidence of that. We have self-compassion. We want to change our thoughts, not only the negative, but maybe what else is true about the situation.
And I think that feeds directly into one of my things on my list of 5 is also how we deal with failure, with actual failure. Because the person struggling with imposter syndrome, first of all, they create false failures quite often. Even though everyone else is telling me this was great, I don't think it wasn't good enough. But there are times when all of us experience real failure. And the person that's already struggling in that area, it becomes huge. It feels like the end. It feels like not only did I not perform well in this situation, I can never perform well in any situation. It becomes that kind of global generalization. So learning how to deal in a healthy way with failure and finding the positive aspect on the other side of failure is a huge piece in making big shifts in this area. So learning to find how to grow from a point of failure. What things should I learn? Again, going back to fact instead of feeling. So what kind of things, what's the evidence now of where the gaps are? How do I fill those actual gaps?
Something that my very good friend Shannon Mattern, she's a business coach for web designers, does in a lot of contexts. I've heard her she uses different words for words that can be triggering. And so failure is a big trigger word. Mm-hmm. And so she has taught me that it's really wanted results and unwanted results. And it neutralizes this concept of failure and makes it more about the data. Okay, I got some unwanted results. What led to those unwanted results? How can I improve those unwanted results? And then how do I go forward? And again, I thought it was brilliant. So I think that also if failure is a triggering thing for someone, maybe looking at it as unwanted results and wanted results. Maybe.
Yeah, I really like that.
Dampen it down a little bit.
Good job, Shannon.
I know. You know Shannon.
She's awesome.
She is. So on the flip side of failure, there's also success.
Yes.
And responsibility, right?
Where are you going with that?
Where am I going with that? Well, I'm thinking about the flip side of it is in imposter syndrome, there are people who really stay committed to their story of not enough.
Yes.
Like, understand imposter syndrome is in and of itself self-protection.
Correct. Very much so.
So if I don't allow myself to break out of it and I keep in my story, then I never have to be responsible. So also dealing with what I'm trying to say is maybe there's a component of this of fear of success, like dealing with that fear of success.
Oh, fear of success. Yes, yes. The way I heard it in my head was like you've overcome something, you're successful. So I was trying to, anyway. That definitely. I
a lot of times put success and responsibility of people. I notice that people who have a fear of success and stay committed to their commiseration often have a fear of success.
Good word.
And behind that comes like, ooh, but if I do better, then I'm going to be more responsible. And
yes,
am I capable, right?
Right.
Of responsibility.
Well, I've had patients and clients over the years use language like, I've faked it this far. I don't think I can take it any further. Or like, they've believed me, like in the big boss has believed me thus far, but I think I'm at the end of that. I'm like, okay, explain that more. And when you get into the story, that's exactly what it is. They have achieved a certain level of success, and they realize that anymore, there's going to be more scrutiny, there's going to be more responsibility, and they're setting themselves up for failure in their world. So that's a really good one. Actually, a good segue into another one on my list is becoming mindfully aware of those people, circumstances, situations, tasks that really trigger the feelings and fear of fraud, that you're a fraud. So, or the fears of failure. So that when you can learn to see specifics in those aspects and learn to track back to maybe where they came from, then you can start really unraveling them. And sometimes it's very hard to do in the moment. But again, the practice of mindfulness helps in a huge way where you notice, oh my gosh, I'm getting so anxious and uptight right now. Where is that coming from? Stepping back and saying, okay, I've noticed when I am with a male in a position of power and they're telling me to do something in a specific way, I immediately start telling myself why I can't do that. Mm-hmm. It may be something that specific or maybe more generalized as when there's something that involves a creative element that I actually have to come up with ideas that others don't have, I'm going to fail.
Mhm.
Like one of mine is I have some learning challenges and I don't spell well. So if there's something where I'm going to have to write in front of people, on a whiteboard or whatever, I'm immediately anxious. And for a long time, I avoided that like the plague. I avoided any situation where I actually had to spell, in front of somewhere because there's a good chance I was going to make a mistake. I spell everything phonetically. That's why I love Italian. I can spell everything in Italian.
It's easy.
Most of the time.
Right?
But that's an example of how something that's task oriented or specific setting or specific person can be. I'm trying to avoid the word trigger to some degree because I feel like it's getting a little overused. So, but can actually open up the feelings and the thoughts that are part of that imposter syndrome.
Could be a bit inflammatory. We're going to come up with all kinds of new words for that.
It helps expand the vocabulary.
Right? So, yes. And along with that, that's part of what we do when we stop and we observe and we become self-aware. The next piece of that is then noticing what works to release yourself. When I said this to myself, I noticed I was calmer. When I went and got a snack, took a break, then I could get.
Exactly.
So it's really noticing when you're in it and then having a strategy to move out of it, not to just stay in it. I think that's a big piece.
Yep.
All right. So we've covered 1, 2, I believe 3 of your 5. And these are really about moving out of imposter syndrome.
Correct. And just from the idea of we all have to start somewhere in terms of where we can direct some focus, build some evidence, and create our own tools that help us get to the other side of it. So the other one was, this is more of an awareness, one of those awareness categories. And we actually had a podcast talking quite a bit about this one. And it's the idea of shame. So imposter syndrome, shame is a driving force. In fact, Brené Brown says that shame is the glue that holds any false narrative together.
Mm.
So it's not only an engine, it keeps it cohesive and keeps it intact, even when there's fact to discount it, to prove it wrong. So becoming aware that we have the shame engine potentially driving the script we have in our head is important, because there's a lot of good work around dealing with shame. And as we all know, Brené Brown is an expert in that area. And reading her books just in and of themselves can be hugely helpful. But learning to deal with or recognize and then come up with the strategies to deal with that fuel of shame, taking the power out of the shame, has a cascade effect when dealing with imposter syndrome. It starts helping us unravel those false narratives and coming up with ways to counter them, which is pretty much my last one in this is working on finding the positive in the situations, because another aspect of imposter syndrome is over focus on the negative and denying or discounting the positive. So in almost every situation, even situations where we haven't done as well as we could have and wanted to, we can find aspects of whether it's our own learning that contribute to our own learning, ways that it landed for certain people or helped certain people or helped a situation in a certain way. And maybe it didn't move the needle as much as we wanted to, but it moved it some. So those are examples of focusing on the positive outcome instead of going directly to the catastrophizing of, this was a huge waste of time. This was a huge failure. This didn't work at all, which usually is not accurate.
Yeah.
I would say the majority of the time, those kind of global statements, black and white thinking, they're not accurate.
Yeah.
So
you got to do, and any business owner will tell you got to do the reps. Like,
yes.
So even if you tanked it, whatever it was, even if it was a disaster, you learned something in the process and you did a rep. You know, And now you're building the muscle and you're refining and you're getting better. So we're very much in finding the gift in the situations, not from a toxic positivity perspective of like, oh no, the bad didn't happen. This is all good. And it's
not denial. We're not talking about denial here. No, we're completely aware that we may have screwed up or that we could have done better. Yes. But it's what you choose to focus on and how to leverage that focus in a way that corresponds to growth, that corresponds to doing better, being better, having better outcomes.
Yeah. So as we wrap up today, what I hope that you take away from this is, number one, so many people go through this. So many people, because we all have big assumptions. We all have challenges sometimes with whether or not we feel worthy, whether we're good enough, being uncomfortable with receiving opportunities that come to us. So it's normal. And also, in doing good in the world, we've got to move out of our own way. We've got to become aware of the conversations that we're having with ourselves, shift the narrative, shift the actions, and eventually the neural pathways get built that those aren't so deep, right? And that you actually do start to think and act differently in the world. And it's so much bigger than just you and feeling good in your skin. It's giving you the ability to do more good in the world. And that's what really needs to happen. Is we need to work together as a collective. And if everybody is so worried about being judged and being in their own, if we are so like me focused, we really can't come together to create a better world. And everybody has a gift that they give. Everybody has something that they have to offer. And I just want to see so many more. And I think entrepreneurs, and it's the small business owners, really that have the ability to make such an impact at a local level that then starts to ripple outwards, in my opinion. That's just how I feel. So
I agree. Can I end with since we're recording this a few days after Jane Goodall has passed.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my favorite quotes from her is, we all have an impact on our world and our environment every single day. It's up to us to choose what that impact is.
Yeah. I love that. So with all that being said, sending you so much love.
Be well, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Conscious Edge podcast. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to be kind and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a review to help us bring more compassionate leaders building businesses and creating wealth to the table. And for show notes, head over to consciousedge.com/podcast. This podcast and the linked materials are presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes and should not be taken as personal or medical advice or any kind of mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you feel you need such services. Please be advised that all investing and entrepreneurial endeavors involve risk, and the use of the education and information on this podcast and linked materials is at the user's own risk.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.